Jeff Moon is the director of Portage, a national library-based network launched by the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, or CAAL, with the goal of building capacity and coordinating research data management activities in Canada. Prior to Jeff's role at Portage, he served as a data librarian at Queen's University Library, as the academic director of the Queen's Research Data Centre, and as manager of the Queen's University Research Data Management Service. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Moon now, who will discuss with us an update on national developments and basically the RDM landscape in Canada and where things are going. So over to you, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Allison. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great, that's fantastic. Welcome all, thank you for taking some time this morning to join us in this wonderful event that's been set up at Memorial and is being offered out to, I understand, a fairly broad audience of participants. So today I'm going to be giving you an update on the Canadian RDM landscape. So what I'd like to start off, if I can get my slides to work. So first of all, I'd like to just acknowledge the fact that we are all living our lives in Zoom, it seems. And it seems that we're, in fact, so overwhelmed by Zoom that the impression that people around us in our families and such might get is a bit odd related to our relationship with work and with computers and so on. So one of our colleagues at the University of Ottawa, Felicity Taylor, her son did a drawing of what he thought his mother's life was these days. And this is his rendition of what his mother is spending her time doing every day. And I thought it was just brilliant, and I give all credit to Damon for his artistic talent and his vision of what Zoom is to his mother. So what we're going to look at today in this Zoom call that we're having right now is what is research data management, an introduction to Portage in the context of research data management, and making data fair. We'll get into what that means. And the ways that we're going to address that are with the tri-agency RDM policy, the supports for institutions and researchers, and other initiatives that support the FAIR principles. And then we'll be looking forward to data management under NDRIO, the new Digital Research Infrastructure Organization. So what is research data management? I expect that many or most of you have seen definitions of what this is, but here's one that resonates with me. Research data management concerns the organization of data, from its entry to the research cycle through the dissemination and archiving of valuable results. It aims at ensuring reliable verification of results and permits new and innovative research built on existing information. So that's sort of our overarching, the marching orders that we have. We all have this as our primary goal. So why manage your research data? Well, because it is a good practice, and that's a message we have to keep selling. Because it is practical, and that's one way we're going to make the message stick. And because it will be required, and that's, speaking of sticks, that is perhaps the stick that's looming over many people who are looking at research data management as something they might have to do. So the research life cycle is idealized here in this diagram, and I'm sure you've seen many variations of this, and we'll be looking at two variations of this in the context of this presentation. But this is what, generally speaking, we're thinking about when we're looking at research and what the researchers are going through. The reasons for good research data management are many. There are drivers out there that some of you have been affected by, I'm sure. But ultimately, we do want to make good use of public funds, improve discoverability and access, extend research, avoid duplication, verify results, meet requirements of journals, and align with international best practices. There are a whole range of reasons why we are in this business of doing and pushing for good data management. What keeps me up at night are two things. The first is avoiding commercial interests gobbling up all the data and then turning around and selling it back to us. And there are aspects of that exist in the ecosystem. And I think there are times when it makes sense to use commercial resources and commercial tools. But generally speaking, I don't want data created with public funds to be sitting behind a paywall. So that's one of my concerns. The other concern is preventing data loss. I'm a pack rat by nature, and I don't want to see any data lost. And so just to bring it home, it can happen to you. This is a picture of my office and the wall beside my desk that got punched through on a Sunday morning or late on a Sunday night. And they reached in and grabbed my laptop. They left the 2 spinning drives, which I was more concerned about than the laptop, because they held all my backed up data. But who knew that somebody would go to the trouble of poking a hole through your office wall to grab something? So it can happen to you, and there are a lot of ways that it can happen. So it's important that we manage our data and make sure that we follow best practices to avoid catastrophic loss. So in response to this, we have the Portage network, and the Portage network is dedicated, as was mentioned in the introduction, to the shared stewardship of research data in Canada through developing a national research data culture, fostering a broad national community of practice, and building national research data services and infrastructure. And this website, this is actually a screenshot of a soon to be launched new refreshed Portage website, which we're very excited about. We hope that it will be available in the next week or so. So Portage is all about our network of experts, training, services, tools, and infrastructure platforms. We are also, in partnership with Research Data Canada, working to facilitate and convene people around data management and to look at international connections and domain focus. And so Portage, both Portage and RDC have been involved in that aspect of the ecosystem. So here's another view of a life cycle, and this one is focused specifically on the research data management life cycle, as opposed to the research life cycle more generally. So we think about research data management in the context of planning, collecting and analyzing data, publishing that data, depositing and preserving that data, and ultimately reusing it, making it available for discovery and appropriate access. Against this backdrop, Portage, and I will say this with all sincerity, the underpinnings of everything that Portage has done tie to the network of experts. And it's the people that we've been able to bring together and work together and achieve so many things over the past number of years. So among those are the data management planning expert group. And you notice these are aligning with the research data management lifecycle. So the data management planning expert group, a curation expert group, a sensitive data expert group, a data repositories expert group, preservation, and a discovery and metadata expert group. And somewhat external, but not less important to the research data management lifecycle, is a research intelligence expert group that gathers metrics from researchers and institutions, but is also working on internal metrics to justify the money that the government is investing in our work, and a national training expert group. In all, we have over 130 experts from over 60 organizations across Canada. So one of the value propositions of Portage was providing national data stewardship support. And over the course of the last, I guess, 15 months or so, Portage has grown. We were 2 people back in July of 2019, and we are now 15. And so this national level of data stewardship support is crucial to our supporting the expert groups, supporting the initiatives, supporting the platforms, services, and tools that we've been working on. So we have, in this context, coordinators and communications officers and other officers and project officer for all of these areas of the research data management lifecycle. And so, as you can imagine, this is a huge phase shift for us at Portage, and it is an exciting time to be involved in this because we're just now ramping up, able to deploy the expertise that these people bring to the table, support the expert groups, and work on a range of initiatives that we just did not have the capacity to work on before. So let's turn to FAIR. How can I make my data fair? Or for those 2 or 3 people who might be in the audience who don't know what FAIR stands for, the FAIR principles stand for making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And that is for both humans and for machines. And machine operability or machine actionability is key to a lot of what we'd like to see happen. Turning to the funder policies, this is, I would argue, one of our most important drivers, one of the primary drivers for the work that we've been doing over the past number of years. And it relates to the 3 elements of the strategy that we expect will be launched early in the new year. The institutional strategy, data management plans, and deposit. So the institutional strategy component of the policy is, not surprisingly, aimed at the institutions, and it requires that they develop an institutional RDM strategy. And Portage has developed and revised recently in 2020 a research data management strategy template that you can use to map out a strategy for your institution. You can use all or none of it, and you can adapt it as you see fit. So it does have fairly broad uptake. Roughly 60% of the people in a survey that was conducted recently, 60% of the institutions that were polled said that they had made use of this template. In terms of data management planning, we have a DMP Assistant, National Online Bilingual Data Management Planning Tool, run through the University of Alberta. And a new version is imminent. And we have as well new discipline-specific DMP exemplars, so sample DMPs from a variety of disciplines, and templates, which are actually sections, questions, and guidance that are specific to a number of disciplines. We have about a dozen of those that are going to be embedded within the new DMP Assistant once launched. And in terms of deposit, we support national multidisciplinary repository options, as well as supporting domains. But the 2 multidisciplinary repository options we support are Dataverse and the Federated Research Data Repository. So how do I make my data fair? Well, the institutional buy-in piece is where the strategy comes into play. So institutions have been asked as part of the policy to post publicly on their websites an institutional RDM strategy. And this is just, these are the 4 sections of the template. So we're just suggesting these as elements within a strategy. These are not prescriptive, but rather just suggestions for institutions. And they would be to raise awareness, to undertake to assess institutional readiness for RDM, formalizing RDM practices, and defining a roadmap. And that defining a roadmap piece is, I think, sort of pointing toward establishing a more formal policy on your campus for research data management. The strategy is a bit more lightweight, and that's one of the reasons why the tri-agencies chose a strategy rather than a policy. But I think the roadmap needs to point an institution toward a more formal policy approach to research data management for their campus. So how do I make my data fair? Well, the other big thing is planning. And planning is what a data management plan is all about. So a DMP describes what data you expect to acquire or generate during the course of a research project and why. Explains how you'll manage, describe, and analyze, and ultimately store your data, and who will be responsible. And details when and where you will deposit your data and how it will be shared. So why do a DMP? Well, it does help you think ahead and map out how you will manage, describe, analyze, store, and share your data. And I think one of the earliest experiences I had with Portage was going to a capstone event for a SSHRC pilot of data management planning writing that brought in 17 partnership grant holders. And my predecessor, Chuck Humphrey, and I met with these 17 research groups, and they were all, I'll say, and I don't want to characterize them necessarily badly, but they were all somewhat kicking and screaming about having to do this. But they also had large SSHRC grants and could hardly say no. So they went into the process, wrote a DMP midway through the research process because none of them were at the beginning of the research, and went through some questionnaires and mapped out their experience. And then at the capstone event, every single one of those 17 groups extolled the virtues of planning. They said that had they done a data management plan at the beginning of the research, they would have avoided costly errors and having to repeat work. They would have had more organized data that would have been easier to work with. And so they left that experience with a very positive view of data management planning, which is sort of contrary to the, oh, it's just another burden that we have to go through. Planning just makes sense. So it does help you identify areas for improvement and questions that need to be answered. And the process of going through a DMP, it's not just gathering information about what you're going to do, but it's actually in some measure informing what you're going to do. Because when having a question posed to you about how you're going to store your data, you have to actually think about how you're going to store your data. Same thing for naming your data, your files, your file structures. All of that are things that the data management plan not only gathers, but it also informs. Provides others with a record of what you intended to do, and ultimately it will be a requirement of the tri-agencies at least, and certainly others. So in terms of support for data management planning, we do, as I mentioned, have the DMP Assistant, national, online, bilingual, step-by-step, easy to use, framed around key sections, questions, and guidance, again, tailored to disciplines in the context of a lot of our templates. You can update anytime and share with collaborators, and the outputs are available in funder-ready formats. How do we make my data fair? Well, the third pillar of the RDM policy is deposit. And before I get into data deposit, I think it's useful to just review the research data storage continuum. Because if there's one thing that seems to raise more confusion and be misinterpreted by people, as I've spoken about data management over the past number of years, it's what do we mean by data storage? Where is data when you're talking about preservation versus putting something into a repository versus active research and so on? So the way we've framed this is to think about data storage as in three broad sectors. First is active storage. This is when the researcher is doing the research, has controlled access. It's a working copy or copies for the researcher's purposes, short-term duration of the project, and it may be stored in a number of places. It could be on a laptop, it could be on high-performance computing, could be on a network cluster of computers. There are a number of places where it can be stored, but it is intended purpose-built for conducting research. Once the research is completed, a copy of the data that's decided to be made public, or made available, is put into repository storage. And that deposit into repository storage is a lot of what we're talking about with Furter and with Dataverse. The data would be open as appropriate. It is a dissemination copy, medium term, beyond the duration of the project, and its purpose is for discovery and access. And ultimately, and this is not for every bit of data that gets deposited into a repository, but ultimately some of these data in the repositories would be curated, actively curated, into long-term preservation storage. So it would go through a preservation processing pipeline, something like Archivematica or other software, to normalize the data and make it into an archival information package to be stored in archival storage, which again is open as appropriate. It's for preservation purposes, it's long-term, and it's disaster recovery copy of last resort. So against that background, what we're talking about in the research lifecycle is active storage covering off this part of the research lifecycle, and archival repository and archival storage covering off the latter part of the research lifecycle. So there are a lot of benefits to data repositories. Ensuring data are discoverable, supporting publishing for discovery and reuse. A lot of researchers, their motivation for coming and depositing data in a repository, coming and approaching the library, in my experience, is they need a DOI. The journal says I need a DOI before I can publish my article, and so they come knocking on your door. And that's a great way of getting the ball rolling on getting data deposited. It'd be better if they came earlier in the research process, but we'll take what we can get. And setting licensing terms and specifying how data sets may be used is important. And I think another one that we're going to be able to increasingly leverage is the ability of data deposited to be monitored. And then once monitored, we can measure research impact by tracking how those data sets are used and cited. So in terms of our repository support in a generalist way, we have two major repository options aside from the domains, and they're Further and Dataverse. And there are a huge number of repositories available in Canada from the domains and other repository options, and they are available both Canadian and internationally in the inventory of research data repositories at re3data.org if you want to go and look at the scope of Canadian repository landscape. So Further is a scalable federated platform for digital research data and the discovery of research data. It's a sort of a two-pronged approach, but we'll get to that. Further is a partnership between Compute Canada and Portage, and it offers big data capable and scalable storage. It retains file hierarchies and handles large numbers of files, and it is geographically distributed. So the file hierarchy piece is important because if at this point in time, if you put large numbers of files and file hierarchies and files nested within each other into something like a Dataverse, it just becomes a long, unambiguous or disambiguous list of files with no hierarchy retained. Further does retain that file hierarchy, and that's, I think, a very useful aspect of it. To date, we have 135 data sets in limited production in Further. Total number of Further accounts, 275, and almost 15 terabytes of published data as of October of this year. Dataverse, which in the context of our discussion and supported discussion, is the Scholars Portal Dataverse, has over 50 institutions as members. There are a lot of Dataverses, a lot of data sets, and lots of files, and a whole truckload of downloads. It is a very active site for people to go to and find the data they're interested in. In addition to Scholars Portal Dataverse, which is funded in part by the Portage initiative through NDRIO, we have a number of standalone Dataverses across the bottom there. And so those two are available to researchers to deposit their data. How do I make my data fair? Well, we ensure they are findable and accessible. And doing that is something that we've been working on with the Further platform. I mentioned it has sort of a dual purpose. It is itself a repository where people can deposit data, and those data would be discoverable. But it's also harvesting metadata into a national discovery layer. And the purpose of this is to improve discovery of Canadian research data and metadata, to break down repository silos, so we don't have to go to 100 different repositories to find all the data we might be interested in. Drives traffic to existing repository sites, so we are not taking data and having people sidestep the repository. We're actually driving traffic to the repository for access to the data. And ultimately, we want to create interoperability between Canadian and international platforms. And this has been achieved in some measure by cooperation with the Open Air project in Europe, where we've shared out our metadata collection to Open Air so that those records are available and searchable in the Open Air platform, and then traffic would be driven back to the Canadian repositories where the data lives. So in terms of harvested Canadian repositories, currently there are 79 harvested repositories, and we are working on some of the more challenging repositories that remain on our list. They need to be worked on to make them harvestable, and we're looking forward to doing that. There are other initiatives that we are working on to make data fair. And one of them is the concept of persistent identifiers. And most of you are aware of persistent identifiers in the context of DataCite and digital object identifiers, but a persistent identifier is a long-lasting reference to a digital resource. It's used to reliably identify and verify and locate digital resources. An example that most of you are aware of is a DOI, or digital object identifier. But there are others out there. So research administration IDs, ORCID IDs for researchers, research organization registry is another. So in the context of DataCite and DOIs, Portage and the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, or CRKN, partnered to take over minting of DOIs from NRC, which for a variety of reasons had to give that up. And so we are now the official DOI minting agency through DataCite Canada Consortium for Canada. So we support minting and managing of DOIs for Canadian institutions, and we help researchers get DOIs for their research outputs easily and without direct costs. ORCID is another persistent identifier, and there is a ORCID consortium in Canada, and it helps solve name ambiguity and researcher identification problems. We publish information about your research interest and collate all your research outputs in one location. I think of it as being sort of an official professional LinkedIn, if you will, for your research. And its adoption by major publishers, funders, and research institutions is certainly driving adoption of ORCID. You can get an ORCID ID for free from the orcid.org URL. There are a lot of other potential PIDs out there. This is just a map put out by Freya to just map out some of the other possible PIDs that are available. The one that I find is kind of cool and I think has gained some interest in people I've talked with is the notion of a persistent identifier for instrumentation, because there are just a myriad of instruments out there gathering information using a variety of proprietary and perhaps generic non-proprietary formats, but just the notion of having a clear idea of what instrument was used to gather this particular information would be a really positive thing, but there are a lot of others there as well. We have as well Core Trust Seal, which is in the context of repository certification. We can make data fair by ensuring that repositories meet a certain standard. And the Core Trust Seal is an internationally endorsed set of core characteristics for trustworthy data repositories. This is not TDR, ISO TDR standard. It is a lighter weight, but still effective set of standards that if a repository can meet, they can claim then that they are Core Trust Seal approved or certified. And that's something that we're going to be working on with in a pilot project involving interested repositories in Canada. We're looking at metadata and controlled vocabularies to improve discoveries. So there is OCLC has a FAST subject headings, which is a subset of Library of Congress subject headings, which are being applied to further submissions to improve discovery. Researchers put in keywords to describe their data, but they're not necessarily consistent or controlled vocabulary keywords. So what this is doing is making sure that there's a better and more consistent searching for researcher data in further. We're also harvesting metadata from more Canadian repositories. As I said, we're at 79, and much of that represents the low-hanging fruit, if you will, but there are a lot of other repositories out there for us to harvest metadata from. And we're also improving geospatial discovery through the Geodesy project. And the Geodesy project out of UBC allows researchers to search for data, not by keyword, but by geography. They can zoom into a bounding box on a map of the world. And once they've got the map bounding box set, they can say, find me all the data for the geography that I'm looking at on my screen right now. And that is an incredible step forward for discovery of data. The use case is if you were asked to find all the data in Northern Canada. I have no idea what kind of keyword search you would plug in. It would be a keyword search as long as my arm and longer to try and capture all of the north of the provinces, the territories, the indigenous lands, any other aspects of the North, if you will, how you would evoke the North in a keyword search. Whereas if you do it with the search, the Geodesy search, you're actually relying fully, completely on a geocoded vector, if you will, of the location of where that data is. And there is no ambiguity. You're in the North, you're part of it, your search results come back. And you can then further refine your search from that geographically discovered subset. We're also looking at work with sensitive data. And so a lot of things have been looked at over the course of my tenure as director of Portage. And it's been something we've been really pushing hard to get some outputs from. The ones that we've made some really good headway on of late are the glossary of sensitive data terms, deposit-friendly text for ethics-informed consent, and a research data risk matrix. And we have Chandra Kavanagh speaking later this morning. And the research data risk matrix was something that she developed, and she, as part of that team, allowed us to sort of extend that to include a very fulsome research data risk matrix for people to look at where their data fits along that continuum. There's also a project out of Simon Fraser, and this is funded fully by Simon Fraser, had some internal funding, and they've partnered with FERDR to support sensitive data deposits. We're not there yet, but what they're working on is really cool. And just a word to all not to ask me detailed questions about this, because the amount that I know about zero knowledge encryption in an RDM context is about this much. My understanding of it is that ultimately curators would be able to receive sensitive data packages and never see the data, but rather do a metadata only review and then be able to curate that data into a sensitive data component of FERDR, and then have it accessible only with very, very careful approvals and authentication control. So it's a very interesting project, and one we're hoping will bear fruit. We're also involved in training, and on this call we have Jennifer Abel, who's our training coordinator for Portage, and she and others have been very much involved in developing and deploying training over the years, along with our training expert group. There is a brand new, soon to be more publicly released strategy on training called Strengthening Research Data Management in Canada, a national training strategy that is going to be released once it's been reviewed and approved by a number of stakeholders. The other thing that we're very pleased to announce is that we are merging the training expert group in Portage with a sister group called the National Research Data Management Training Working Group. We're merging those groups into one national training expert group. And that's an exciting development. And we hope that the same sort of thing happens with the rest of our expert groups and other committees and such from sister organizations. So looking forward, we have the new Digital Research Infrastructure Organization. And I will, for the rest of my life, remember the launch of this organization, because the organization launched itself, or was launched in Ottawa on March 11th of this year. And we all convened face-to-face up in Ottawa, which seems like the twilight zone now. And it was the day before the lockdown. It was the day before all the sports leagues shut down, before the major other major things were shut down. I, in fact, could not get a train home. I got a train to Ottawa, but I could not get a train back because they said everything's just shut down. So the fact that we got this done face-to-face was amazing. We were all a little bit nervous and shaking hands with our elbows, but it was the last time that I've done anything in a face-to-face context. So it will be something that I will not soon forget. But the launch of this has been very exciting. And it basically takes this before picture for the DRI landscape. And it looks a little bit complex there in terms of where the funding is coming from and who's running what. It takes that and turns it into a much simpler diagram showing you that Canary will be continuing to work on digital research platform, the network component of the ecosystem. And then NDRIO will be taking over data management, research software, and advanced research computing. But they're all working together. So we have a new CEO, Nizar Ladak. He is formerly the CEO of Compute Ontario. And I have not had the opportunity to meet with him. We're hoping that the data management crowd will be able to have an opportunity to share the work we've done with Nizar in the near future. This is the NDRIO board, which happy to say we were able to elect unanimously back on March 11th. And on this screen, you'll see probably a couple of people you might know, but we have two librarians there. We have Donna Bourne-Tyson from Dow, and we have Martha Whitehead, who was formerly my boss at Queen's University, but is now the university librarian at Harvard. So we're well represented in terms of libraries and understanding of data management on the NDRIO board. We also have a researcher council, and this was more recently convened, and there are a lot of people on this. You can just see, hopefully see who they are. They're all there. And they are a very representative cross-section of researchers from Canada. So there 19 members are from universities, 3 from research hospitals, some early career, some later career. They're regionally distributed well across the country. They come with a lot of data and research software and computing expertise. Some of them have experience in all 3 domains. And they come from different disciplines. So roughly the 7, 6, and 9 from the humanities, social sciences, the health sciences, and the hard sciences, respectively. So that, I think, was a major achievement of NDRIO to attract the quality of the researchers that we have for the Research Council. And their role will be to advise and inform the directions for all 3 of the areas of activity within NDRIO, including data management. So one of the first things that NDRIO did was hire a librarian to serve as a senior analyst in mapping out the current state of research data management in Canada. And Shahira Kher, who formerly was a project officer with Portage, but is currently a curation librarian at the University of Victoria, has been seconded half-time to NDRIO to serve as a senior analyst for data management. She's been joined by 3 other people who, in total, they make up 3 full-time equivalents, FTEs, looking as well at advanced research computing and research software. And work is proceeding on the current state papers for research data management, for research software, and for advanced research computing. Those current state papers are going to be, or actually it's happening coincidentally, I think, are going to be accompanied by a needs assessment, and ultimately we'll be moving forward with a strategic plan looking out into the future for NDRIO based on those sources of feedback. So key priorities for data management in this is continuing to roll out national data stewardship support. We are providing coordinated support at the national level across the data lifecycle through our coordinators, through our research curation officers, through our project officer and our communications officer. We're working to make sure that data management is supported nationally, and that our expert groups who have been volunteering and working on initiatives on the sides of their desks can continue to do that, but do it in a way that is supported nationally and takes some of the burden off of them. We still absolutely need and rely upon our network of experts and want that to continue and grow, but we now can provide some central coordinating support for those initiatives and others. The other thing that we're going to continue to work on is the RDM platform support and development. So we will continue to develop and operationalize national collaborative RDM platforms and services. And these will include launching further into full production early in the new year. These will include launching the new DMP Assistant 2.0 in the coming weeks and months, and developing other platforms and services as identified by the Researcher Council and by the needs assessment. And finally, we're going to be working to transition to NDRIO. We are, in fact, now fully funded by NDRIO as of October 1st. And within that context, we'll be looking at merging Portage and Research Data Canada committees. There's work been done on that, and a plan is in place. We are looking to integrate with ARC and research software. Work is progressing on that as well. We have experience in that sense already with the work with FIRDR. We've been partnering with FIRDR for the past 3-4 years to develop that repository platform and the discovery service associated with FIRDR. But there are other places where this is, I think, going to be key. One that just came up, well, it's come up in the past with a project called Radium, which deals with the active storage side of the house. But it also came up in a phone call earlier this week with the CEO of CAAL-CBPA Quebec, Suzanne Talon, who was asking about how we can get the analysts in ARC to be more aware of data management so that the data that is actually working its way through the active storage and the active research portion of the research lifecycle can end that cycle, that part of the cycle, more deposit ready, more prepared for preservation and good data management practices at the end of that part of the research. Their goal is in part to do better research, but it's also, her estimate was 30% of the storage that they're providing, and it's expensive, this high performance computing, 30% of that storage was wasted by multiple copies, redundant copies, old data that is no longer of any importance. And better management will basically provide that, give them the opportunity to provide better high performance computing service to researchers in Canada. So there's a lot of interest in that. And we are also looking at the, as I mentioned, the needs assessment and input from the Researcher Council, which is going to be coming over the next number of months. So the Portage Secretariat, I am very happy to say, is fully constituted. These are the people we have attracted to Portage, and we're very excited to be working with them. There may be some familiar faces here. Some of these people were hired back in the fall of 2019. Others have started just this month. So we are very pleased to have all of these people, some of whom are on this call, working with us. And we look forward to continuing to serve the research data management community through this national secretariat support. And that's what we look like every Thursday when we have our meeting. And it's kind of cool that we fit this way. If we had one more person, we'd be bopping down into another row, and I don't know what that would look like. So in terms of a timeline for transition to NDRIO, we're looking at where we were up to September 30th with Canary funding, Canary directed funding. We are right now in the midst of purely NDRIO funding, directed funding. And we're in the midst of planning out, working with NDRIO to plan strategically for the next tranche of funding, which will start on April 1st of 2021, where we'll be working with them fully, completely, and we will no longer be under CAAL. Right now, we're sort of funded by NDRIO through CAAL. As of April 1st, we'll be funded by NDRIO directly, not through CAAL. Canary is working with us through all of this. Their funding runs out as of March 31st, 2022. And we are also coordinating with and aligning with the Advanced Research Computing, Research Software, and Network folks at Canary. So looking forward, we are hoping to improve discovery, develop and deploy national RDM training strategy, grow a national network of curation, supporting the evolution of national preservation services, addressing issues related to sensitive data, working with domains to address discipline-specific issues and needs, promoting data management planning, advancing repository certification, successfully merging data management into NDRIO. We want to make a splash. We want to make sure that the NDRIO folks and the government know that we are in the data management community, working in the interests of researchers and the interests of institutions, and in line with government policies. And all of this would not be possible without our network of experts, but also all of these other groups. And I'm sure I've left some out that I should have included, but these are the folks that we're working actively with to achieve what we're working on. So with that, I will certainly open the floor to any questions you may have, and I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Okay, so if you'd like to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A thing there, I can moderate the questions. And like Jeff said, he's happy to answer any questions.
I can't hear you, Allison.
Sorry, I muted myself instead of unmuted. I have a quick question. I know you were tossing around ideas for the new name of NDRIO rather than have it new DRI organization. Is there any word on what a new name might be? And is Canada Dry still in the running?
If I recall correctly, Laurie McMullen, one of the initial leaders of this initiative, and executive director of CUCIO, which is the CIO, the information officer crowd. She first coined that and thought that it would be brilliant. I wouldn't personally be against that, but it's not something that I have any say on. There is a communications branch, if you will, of NDRIO that is going to be looking at this. There are a lot of questions around branding. There are questions around the name of the new organization. There are questions on how advanced research computing, research software, and data management will be expressed to the community through NDRIO. We have just gone through a lightweight, it was fair, I say lightweight, and I know Kathleen is on the call, she's our communication officer, and she'd say it's been anything but lightweight. Refresh of our website, which I think was long overdue. But I think the work that we've done on refreshing the Portage website will stand us in good stead as we move toward NDRIO branding. There has even been some talk, but this is just still way up in the air. Is there any value in maintaining the Portage brand within NDRIO? And not that we would want to be, and I don't want to be, some sort of separate entity that's within NDRIO at somewhat arm's length. I want data management to be fully baked in and fully engaged within the ARC and research software discussions and such, so that there's a bit of a tension there in my mind as to whether or not there's a value of maintaining the Portage brand. If you have opinions on that, feel free to weigh in and share that with NDRIO. Their website is engagedri.ca. So engage DRI, all one word. And I believe there's a place there for you to provide them with feedback. And certainly the needs assessment and researcher council will possibly weigh in on the branding of NDRIO. Some people have said just make it national DRI organization. Others are saying, no, we've got to get away from NDRIO. It's been around long enough that I'm a little bit concerned that it's maybe rolls off the tongue now too easily, at least en anglais, that maybe it'll stick. I think there's a real interest in seeing it branded differently. I just don't know what it'll end up being.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions for Jeff? I know there was one question earlier. Someone had asked to post the link to search the data by geography, and Aaron McPherson added the link in there. It's geo.further-dfdr.ca.
Yeah, the geodesy search is still in beta, and that's intentional and necessary. It's in beta for the one primary reason it's still in beta is that it has not been translated, so it's not available in English and French, so we cannot launch it officially. So it is still beta, but there is also work underway to have it embedded more seamlessly into the further search. So there is work to try and refresh the discovery layer in a way that would embed geographic searching with keyword searching in a more seamless fashion. We're not there yet, but that's something that is certainly on the development agenda for further.
Okay, so if there's any other questions, pop them in the chat. Oh, you had mentioned that the website redesign would be going live soon. It's actually live now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it just went live this morning, I believe. So great timing.
Call out to Kathleen O'Hare. I know that we. I mean, I must have been cruel and unusual on Friday, because I said to her last week, I said, why don't you do it on Friday morning, which basically means that if it didn't go well, her weekend is ruined. So I don't know how much work she put in over the weekend getting this done and such, but I give all credit to her and to some of the other coordinators who've been working on that, the guts of that and the content of that website. And I'm just so pleased that that it's launched. I should have checked it. I should be checking it every morning, but that's fantastic. The other thing that's sort of a parallel development, and you'll notice that if you go into the Portage website and go to training or training resources, it is really just a rather crude list of all of the training resources that looks similar to what you would have found on the old website. And that was intentional and necessary because we were just not, we were not ready to, and we did not have the resources and time to devote to developing a training portal, which we have every intention of developing. And the training portal is going to be purpose-built for training resources and purpose-built to ensure discovery not only of the appropriate resources, but resources that are appropriate to different audiences. So if you're a researcher, if you're a data specialist, if you're an administrator, you're going to have ways in to some of the training resources that are available that we've been developing over the course of the last number of years, and we plan on developing under the new data management training strategy. So I'm really excited about the new website. That's fantastic. That's good.
Yeah, it looks great. There's a comment that there's a lot of abbreviations, which sometimes are very confusing. Is there like a glossary of terms or anything somewhere?
You know what, there is a glossary there are a couple of glossaries. One was the sensitive data glossary that I mentioned, which itself might address acronyms in some measure. There is another glossary on the website. I'm just not sure, having not looked at it recently, whether it is defining terms related to data management or whether it actually goes into the acronym side of the house. So there we go. Thanks, Aaron. I just don't know, again, having not looked at that in some time, whether it actually defines further, defines ARC, defines RS, defines what CCF is, and so on and so forth. If it doesn't, then note to self, and I say that in the broadest sense, Jennifer, as our training coordinator, or Kathleen as our communications officer, that is something we could look at and make sure that we're not leaving people high and dry. My apologies for being so acronym laden in the presentation. And I will also do a call out to whoever it was that was doing the simultaneous translation. I have no idea how that went. I would love to have some feedback as to how that went. And we are committed to making sure that we have English and French services. And so I'd be interested to see how that went, but I don't envy them their job. It's not something I could do.
Excellent, thank you very much.
He had to translate that, so it's kind of, you know, so congratulations to the translator. Now she has to say that, or he has to say that.
Yeah, it's a very acronym heavy field, I find. I've been in this field for a number of years and I'm still finding acronyms that I have to go look up every now and then, so.
And I would be lost. I mean, I can speak in French, but if you ask me to translate beyond the technical terms within data management, I don't know what further in French is. So anyway. DFDR. Merci beaucoup, Bernadette.
Okay, if there's no more questions for Jeff, I would like to thank you very much on behalf of CAAL and the RDM working group that we put together. Oh, there, Bernadette put the full name of FERDR in French in the chat. I do not speak French, but I'll try this. Dépôt fédéral données de recherche. I don't know if that was any good or not.
C'était super. Merci, Alison.
Okay, so thanks very much, Jeff. Our next session will be at 10:30 Atlantic time, and that will be with Aaron McPherson and Melissa Rothis. It's on this same channel. So just take a break for 20 minutes and we'll meet back here in 20 minutes. So thanks very much, Jeff, and have a great day. Thank you also for presenting so early. I know it's really early for you right now.
Not that bad. Believe me, we have people on the West Coast who have gotten up a lot earlier than I had to. So when we have meetings, so thank you. Enjoy your day, everyone.
All right, thanks, you too.
Bye.